The Yellowstone National Park is the first of its kind. It's 2 million acres, covers Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. That's bigger than Delaware and Rhode Island combined. It homes 72 species of mammals, 322 species of birds, and more than 1,000 different types of plants. With more than 300 geysers, the Yellowstone National Park reportedly receive roughly 3 million tourists a year. They may come all over the world to visit their canyons, see wildlife, camp, or just ski. The list of activities can go on. Now, imagine this 3,500 square mile park being destroyed and leveled within a day. Not by deforestation, not by a nuke, but something bigger than we've ever seen, a supervolcano. Scientists predict that every 600,000 years, the supervolcano within the national park would erupt, destroying anything within a 100-mile radius almost immediately. It's been 650,000 years since the last eruption. Today, I want to alarm you of the destructive effects if the Yellowstone National Volcano would go off today. So, what is a supervolcano? It's an unusually large volcano and it has a magnitude of 8 on the volcanic index explosivity. It's similar to the Richter scale and has the same scale from 1 to 8. The supervolcano is known to be 8. As of today, there are 20 known supervolcanoes around the world. There are 3 in Indonesia: Mount Tambora, Toba, and Krakatoa. Yellowstone is active as of today. There are 2 others in Iceland and in Florida. They are rare and they occur on average every 10,000 years. And these volcanoes are not your regular structural volcano. They're not cone-like. They're not like a dome. They're not like a traditional volcano. They're more underground with a humongous magma chamber. This magma chamber under Yellowstone is 35 by 55 miles wide and 9 miles deep. So how do they form? International Geography says when magma in mantle rises into crust from the hotspot, but it is unable to break the pressure, builds in a large and growing magma pool. So over thousands of years, this magma builds and churns, and one day the pressure won't be able to be contained, and one day it will inevitably blow up. So the past eruptions and pattern have proved that it might blow up soon. The first eruption happened 2.1 million years ago, and it was said to be the largest eruption in recorded history, according to International Geography. It formed the island Park Caldera, and it also caused the Huckleberry Ridge. The second eruption happened 640,000 years ago, and it formed the caldera, producing Lava Creek Tuck. If the pattern were to continue, then that means we're overdue by an eruption by 50,000 years. So, what would happen if the volcano were to erupt today? The first dead giveaway of an eruption would be that there would be earthquakes going all over the place. You would feel earthquakes in the immediate area. You would also see animals and wildlife being very disturbed and having very irregular patterns of behavior, running the site or fleeing away. Roughly 240 cubic miles of material will get ejected from this supervolcano, and this has the potential to be 2,000 times bigger than Mount St. Helens. When magma gets released, it turns into lava, but when this magma chamber, multiple events can get creating multiple volcanoes within the site. This can cause multiple vents forming one chain reaction, causing one gigantic vent opening within the volcano. And each vent has more power than Mount St. Helens. So the vent would release ash, sulfur, rocks, and lava. The biggest threat is ash. This is the past eruptions and the comparison, as you can see. Huckleberry Ridge is one of the biggest ones from Yellowstone volcano. Those are all smaller size volcanoes, a little bit blurry. This is the ash zone. The first ash zone will receive roughly 1,000 millimeters of ash. That's about 39 inches of ash. That's 3 feet deep of ash in that first area, the immediate area of the volcano. The second zone will receive 300 to 1,000 millimeters of ash. The third zone will receive 100 to 300. The fourth zone will receive 30 to 100 millimeters of ash. And the fourth zone, which is us in California, we will receive 10 to 30 millimeters of ash. This ash is very dangerous for many reasons. For one, it could pollute our water systems. This could cause people to go out of water shortages. It could also kill our agriculture and our livestock, which might cause for food shortages. This may have a potential effects to have some type of riots going on in the streets. People don't have enough food, not enough water, people will go crazy. All it takes is 1 centimeter of ash to close on airports. If you're trying to leave the area, the airports will be closed in our area. There will be too much ash for airplanes to take off. We might potentially crash. This ash can cause very bad lung damage. It could cement your lungs. When you inhale too much ash, it makes a cement mixture within your lungs, and pretty much you'll suffocate if you inhale too much. It also causes silicosis. Silicosis is a lung disease, which is caused by too much dust, inhaling too much dust. This is permanent damage as well. These vents from the supervolcano would also release sulfur. Sulfur smells very bad. It's like a rotten egg. It's like a rock. It's a very bad chemical and will start being released into the atmosphere. Once it's released in the atmosphere, it might reflect sunlight all throughout the country. If a lot is dispensed, it can kill animals. But the biggest problem is the sulfur. It might create an ice age because the sunlight will not be able to get through the first layer of the sulfur. It's happened before. In 1816, it was a year without summer. Mount Tambora erupted in 1815 and had injected 160 kilometers of ash. The effects were seen along the globe. In Europe, there was famine, there was food shortage, there was not enough food to be made because the weather was too cold. It was too cold to produce any food or harvest or crops. There was snow well into June, and there was persistent fog. Harvest is all failed. And in Asia, the trees died out because it was too cold. Floods were caused by monsoons, causing rice production to stop completely. They were unable to produce food. The Yellowstone volcano will be a humongous eruption if it were to erupt. But scientists do predict that it should not erupt for another few thousand years. Although you can still visit this park, there shouldn't be too much of a big problem because they don't think it's erupt at all. But if it does erupt, it will have an eruption similar to ones that have in the past, potentially making America uninhabitable. But if you're planning to visit the volcano, go right ahead, you still have time.
Just imagining it would be on there when it develops. We're standing in a blaze of glory.
Okay, where is it? Jacob, what did you think?
It was overall pretty good. Two things that you did pretty good is you showed great technical knowledge of all the behind the aspects of the volcanoes, of previous volcanoes and things like that, and tying it all together well. And you did a good job of explaining why it can be a potential problem and why we need to watch out for it. Two things that you could probably improve on. In the beginning, you were throwing out a lot of technical information that isn't necessarily common to a lot of folks. It seems like you're just trying to kind of rush through it a little bit, so maybe just take a breath and kind of progress it a little more naturally, slow down a little bit. And then overall, your visual aids were pretty effective. They did a pretty good job, but maybe include a few more of how, a couple of statistics, a couple of bullet points that can kind of highlight some of the bigger themes you were going over. But overall, you did it pretty well.
All right. Yeah, I think I know what Jacob's talking about there concerning some of that early technical material. There's one spot where you're talking about magma pools under the surface, and I'm thinking, well, how does that work? And what does that look like? And my guess is that there's probably some diagram somewhere that shows how that works. Subterranean, pools and that sort of thing. And I'm, because it's not just like it's Lake Tahoe of magma sitting there. It's covered, I assume, and that's one of the reasons that the pressure builds up. So I think there's just a little bit of background information on how volcanoes work in the first place that doesn't get explained, and then the super volcano, why it's different than the other kinds of volcanoes. That's the thing that I think is kind of missing there early on. I did think, though, that you had a very extensive description of all of the horrifying things that are going to happen if it does go off. You did a nice job listing those things and explaining why those would occur. What's missing, for the most part, is a source citation for most of this information. I thought I heard a couple of citations of information about a couple of the early examples of supervolcanoes going off. I thought I heard a source citation at one point, and then that was the last time I heard any mention of any source material for this information. Everything else, I know you're not making this stuff up. It came from someplace, so you ought to be telling us where it came from. And let's face it, you've got visuals there that probably have some of that citation on the visuals. I didn't look at the map, for instance, but it wouldn't surprise me at all that that came from the U.S. Geological Service or some group like that, and you ought to be telling us those kinds of things. That enhances your credibility that you're getting it from somebody who has technical expertise on this subject, so that it doesn't just seem like you are making stuff up and telling us a scary story, that you're telling us something that people are legitimately knowledgeable about, and that there is a long-term concern there. All right, the other thing that I think is a little bit problematic is that there's no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, and I couldn't tell you what the organizational structure is. It's topical at best, but I couldn't tell you what the individual points were. So the material all just kind of seems to be jammed together, and it needs to be divided up a little bit more into discrete parts that'll be easier for us to digest. There's a different analogy than the driving one that I used earlier. Let's put it into bite-sized chunks so that we're not trying to choke down the whole meal at once, but one little bit at a time. I can see that there is a dividing point between some of the things that you're talking about, but you need to tell us what those dividing points are, and not let the information kind of roll on top of the next piece of information, which I think does happen a bit in the presentation. The visuals, for the most part, are interesting. Look, the images that you have at the beginning of Yellowstone to begin with, everybody's looking, ooh, that's beautiful. And then, you've got a later image. I don't know what volcano it was that was exploding there, but that's pretty dramatic, and I think people can understand. And when you put it into context, one of the things that you might point out, because you made a comparison a couple times to Mount St. Helens, I remember Mount St. Helens, but I'll bet nobody else here was alive when that was going on and was, happening, and that was a big deal. So they don't have the comparative. You need to give us a comparative. Here's when Mount St. Helens blew. Here's how far it covered, what the damage was, how many people died, and it's a pretty constricted thing. And in terms of size, it was 1/40th of what, or whatever the number is, of what a supervolcano thing would be doing. And we're talking about something that's going to be so much substantially bigger. That would be, I think, an easy comparison to make, and maybe a visual would help that a little bit. I like the map that you have at the end of the ash zone and all of the potential problems there. And then you talk about a lot of the things that could happen. And again, you cited some historical precedents that are going on, and I know that you've got that information from someplace. I don't think you've made up a volcanic explosion in 1815 and droughts, or not droughts, but famines that resulted from that. I don't think that you just created that out of whole cloth. You read about it someplace. So again, tell us that kind of thing. And I think that that would help a lot. All right, thank you.